Welcome to I Have Some Questions. The show is all about asking questions our guests have never asked themselves before, never thought about, or been too afraid to explore. It's designed to uncover the human story at the root of successes and failures and help us as an audience learn and grow from that story. My hope is that you'll hear brilliant guests exploring new ideas and challenging themselves in new ways of thinking. I think this makes for great conversations. I'm going to bring on entrepreneurs, authors, coaches, scientists, and frankly, any vein of super interesting, successful, and passionate human I can find. I am fascinated by passionate people, and I have some questions for them. I'm Erik Berglund, and I hope you'll join me every week for new episodes.
So you walk into a team meeting, and your team tells you, hey, Erik, your stress really impacts the team. Eek! So I had a client who just experienced this. I went through it myself a couple years ago when I had a direct report basically tell me the same thing. And this client of mine is like frustrated and a little mad and upset, both at herself and also at the y'all don't even understand how much I protect you. And so there's this weird tension that she's working through, which is totally valid. And I've worked through it too. But Erik, if you walk into that meeting and your team says that, what do? How would you respond?
Boy, you're giving me PTSD of how poorly I did this with my team. I was the opposite. I didn't show them the stress. So I was a permanent shield, and that had its own consequences that I had to learn about. So, you asked the question, what would I do? Well, I know what I've done. And then I know what I've coached other people through and what I think I would do now. And so I suppose it's worth talking about both those. I guess the biggest thing that jumps out to me when this type of dynamic occurs, because this one specifically I haven't coached through, but I've had clients who have dynamics like this, where I think what's worth seeing is the amount of trust that's implied when your team is willing to be vulnerable by telling you something like that. That's not a low risk game for them to play. It's not a low risk effort for your team to sit around and come up with how they're going to say this, potentially considering what words do we use, who's the poor schmuck that actually has to say it, right? There's the time.
Is my boss going to get mad when I say it?
Boy, there's a lot. That's a loaded thing that I think if you had the opportunity as the leader to sit back and reflect on would be worth appreciating. People don't share things like that with people they don't care about or that they don't have some degree of trust with. Now, it very well could be that they're at their wit's end and there's no other choice and they're going to pull the ripcord and quit if they don't. But let's assume that's not the case. I think the first thing I would try to acknowledge is the appreciation that I might want to have for people who care enough about me to tell me that. In the same way that you hope your spouse or your kids would tell you if you're being a terrible husband or father or something, that would suck. And they would only say so if they felt like they had the safety to do so. So that's, I guess, thing number one. But if I were going through that and I could get past my initial frustration, justification, I suppose that, I'd probably work through the forms of grief at some point through this process where some part is deflection, right? Where I'm like, to your point, you don't even know what I shield you from, right? I justify to some degree the emotional strain I do show them. But if I could get through those things, I think it might create the platform for conversations I probably wish I'd known how to have beforehand. Mm-hmm. Because the stress I'm showing you is probably some amount of tension created by pressure coming from the top and my inability to create the desired outcome that the top is looking for by leadership as opposed to me taking it on. And there's probably room in there where I could recruit the people who care enough about me to tell me that my stress is wearing them out, to recruit them to what can we do to alleviate the things that are causing this stress, because we're in this together and we have to work through it. I suspect that would be direction I would want to try to take it if I could be my best self in that moment. But now I'm kind of curious, what'd you tell her and what would you do?
Well, I always go last. So this was a group coaching call, and I always like to have all of the other women who are in the program share their thoughts first. And one of the reasons for that is they can learn just as much from the other women as they can from me. And one of those women, we've talked about on the podcast before, just lost 43% of her team last month through a riff. Ooh. And so she ended up sharing a story about how through that process, she realized that part of her protection was overprotection. And so her team sharing something similar in different words made her go, oh crap, like, I've held on to too much. And now I need to figure out, how do I end up sharing not everything, but like, where can I read you into things that you haven't been a part of the process before so that they have a broader understanding? That was one piece. For me in particular, one of the pieces was like, okay, I can be really, we were going through an acquisition. And so I was learning a new CEO who I reported directly to. Everything was a priority, but new CEO, like sale hadn't closed. So new CEO wanted certain things done, but I couldn't actually move on them yet because former CEO still had veto power and said no. So I was straddling this middle ground of like, get everything ready, but you can't actually launch everything. And we might pivot fully back. And so for me, it was also like, okay, what are my stress outlets that aren't just with my team? And it sounds goofy, but before I would go into a one-on-one or a team meeting, I would literally stop, and I work from home. So I would literally stop, I'd stare out the window, or I'd sit in my chair and I'd go, okay, how do I want to show up to this meeting? Not like, let me put a mask on and pretend nothing's happening, but an acknowledgement of like, yeah, there's a crap load of stuff going on, and how I show up impacts my team. So sometimes it was like, I'm going to take 3 deep breaths and then go into this meeting and like regulate in that way. And then the second piece was something that when I brought to this client, she's like, yeah, I'm not there yet. And I was like, that is totally valid. The second piece for me, which also did not happen right away, was saying like, okay, what would happen if I could see this comment as a gift? And she was like, I'm not there yet. And I was like, valid, totally valid. And I love that you said that. For me, I was probably not there yet either. Like this was a couple of years ago. I don't entirely remember, but it was part of the framing for me of being like, okay, Alli, you were a chief everything officer. I didn't have the term for it at the time. You hold on to too much. You do things that your team should be doing, et cetera. Like, where can we start seeing, where am I, Alli, causing more stress that I need to, and bring people along to help them level up to the next level? Does that track?
I think so. As you were talking there, I was reflecting on what is going on in our minds when we're portraying our stress to other people. Like what's at the root cause of it? And I don't mean a root cause issue. Like there's a billion different specific things that cause that. But like, you know, these things come into our mind. If you're not watching, if you're just listening, it's like there's these things that come into the top of our head, pressure. What is it that causes that pressure to turn into stress? And I think it's some origin or some extension of the sentence, I don't know how to, ... The types of things that cause me to be stressed.
Or I can't.
Right? Yeah, that's actually probably where we most of the time start with. And I was pivoting too quickly to I don't know how to, which is the much healthier way to say it. But some degree of feeling like I can't or I don't know how to, I think is often at the root of the things that manifest as stressful communication with other people. So if I could have a really helpful team member who said, hey, boss, you're stressing us out. You got to knock that shit off. And they could say, and we want to help you through it. Mm-hmm. So maybe you could take this marker right here and over there on the whiteboard, just start this sentence, I can't ... and like finish the sentence as many ways as possible. You know, and then maybe a second variation would be, I don't know how to ... right? I suspect that mechanism of I can't and I don't know how to is at the root of the vast majority of our stresses.
Okay, pause for a second. I'm going to interrupt. Because if you're I'm picturing this, and I'm like, if I'm in this room, my team hands me a marker, I'll write some things down, but there's other things I'm not going to write down.
To be fair, I'm skipping past the safety I may have with sharing some of these things.
Okay.
I'm just trying to think through, like, if I'm that leader, to your point, and I'm trying to turn this into a gift, on the other side of that gift is an ability to answer those things I don't know how to do or I can't do.
Yeah.
So they just tell me your stress throws me out, and I could say, you know what, here's why. Not here's why as an excuse, but here's why. What can we do to fix that, right? What process can we change? What skill can we develop? Who can we hire? Whatever. That'd be where you'd want it to go, right? I suppose the desired outcome of that conversation is an action plan wherein maybe you're always so good at this. You have the take a few deep breaths, somatic, start with yourself. Like you're really, really dialed into that. And that's a healthy thing that it maybe come out of it too. But I suspect there would also be a lot of opportunities for a leader to articulate the I can't or I don't know hows in a way that they may be able to offload some of that and not carry it around all day, which means maybe it won't manifest on the team.
Yeah. Like for me, one of them was I'm running, like my team is in charge of putting on a 700-person conference with 90 speakers and 30 sponsors and 5 rotating breakout sessions over 4 days. And I'm also supposed to handle the whole awards program and the new strategy and vision for the CEO. Oh, and we're going to do local events and we need a whole strategy and a 3-year plan for that. And I was like, I can't. Like I straight up cannot. Yeah. Unless you can clone me. And I literally said this to my CEO at one point. I was like, unless you can clone me, we need to rejigger some things. And part of that rejiggering was me going, well, crap, I can't do this. And I can't show all that stress to my team and just pretend that I'm the only one who can handle it. So how do I help them level up so that they can take one or these projects on, or 2 of these projects on, or pieces of them? And I think we'll probably do another podcast on this, but I ended up doing a lot of stretch projects and building in the scaffolding of like, you're not quite at this level yet. And in the reality of the situation that we are in, I need you to take this on. So how do we build a plan together? I didn't just say, how do you build a plan? Because these were massive. How do we build a plan together that'll help you get there and also takes this off my plate? And they ended up loving it. It doesn't mean it was all perfect rainbows and sunshines, but sunshines? You know what I mean.
Multiple. There were many much suns.
Many much suns, yes.
All right. So we've shared our high-minded ideals around this. I've skipped past the probably bare human reaction I would have in that moment, which would be to be frustrated and attacked and defensive. And if I could take those deep breaths, that probably would be the most helpful thing. Because if that trust is true, that's an opportunity for them to be candid in a way they may not have been before, and maybe for me to do the same. But I have to show up and meet that moment. And it probably is deeply rooted, not in a high-minded leadership ideal, but probably more in the reality of channel my best self and be present in this moment with open ears. So I'm stealing yours, and that's my take. That's my thing to leave people with, because I think that's the best advice.
I like it. I would also say, I guess what I would leave people with is, and I think she's literally going through this, like there's a sense of grief there. So feel those feelings, and then maybe this is goofy, figure out what it is for you. But in some of those moments, whether it was like, oh my God, I've stressed out my team. I feel like a failure of a leader and I don't know how to do anything differently. Or when I was so frustrated trying to manage up to the CEO, my 2 favorite things to do were, 1, to go run sprints out in the field outside of my front door, because the amount of just like adrenaline and frustration I could let out in that field, there's an actual like old road through it, was huge. And 2, beautiful pro tip, if you don't have a Peloton subscription, that's okay. Go find a YouTube video, go do some shadow boxing. I cannot tell you how much throwing some punches into the air, and yes, I'm literally going to say this, making grunting noises makes everything so much better.
Key tip. That's that last takeaway is the one to absolutely. I love the visual I have of if I ever drove by your neighborhood and I saw you running up and down the street really fast, be like, oh, I know what Allie's living through today. All right, I see what type of day she's having here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There are brilliant ideas for this episode.
Those. So at a human level, that's probably what we both landed on, is that there are tools like you need to probably be able to process that in the moment, or set yourself up to hear it, receive it, work through it, so that you can get to some of the high-minded ideals that we may offer as well. That's a good one. Good luck to that individual. Wait, did we hear? What did she do?
We're going to find out.
Oh.
This week, because it just happened.
All right. Well, hopefully to be continued then. Good luck to her. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us this week. Don't forget to take a second and subscribe. Maybe even share this episode with somebody it made you think of, or someone you think would take some value from it. This show is all about uncovering the brilliance and humanity of high performers. And whether those performers have a massive following, or a podcast, or a book, or they're a business owner, or they're buried somewhere in a corporation, or maybe they're a nonprofit leader, or, they don't necessarily have to have a title. I'm really fascinated by people who are passionate and who are doing interesting things. So if you or somebody you know would be a good guest, don't hesitate to reach out to me on LinkedIn, or send me an email at hello@languageofleadership.io to make that connection. I'll see you next week.